So on behalf of Bryant's Alumni Association, welcome to our Career Series webinar, Creating Successful Webinars. In this presentation, we will identify the techniques for engaging webinars, cover the roles of the presenter and the moderator, and acquaint you with the webinar delivery system. So before I turn the program over to our presenters, Rita Williams-Bogar and Marissa Crean, I need to provide you some ground rules for today's webinar, which will last for an hour. All participants are in a listen-only mode. However, we encourage you to comment and ask questions using the question and answer feature located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Now I'll turn the program over to Marissa Crean, class of '81 and director of the finance track of the Early Career Leadership Development Program at the Hartford. Marissa is an active member of Bryant's National Alumni Council and also serves as a career coach for our alumni. And that's usually the opening that I use for our webinars. So with that, Marissa, take it away.
Thank you, Tim, and welcome to our attendees. It's my pleasure to introduce Rita Williams-Bogar, class of 1976, as our inaugural webinar speaker. Rita has her MBA and is pursuing her doctorate from Walden University, where she's also on the faculty and leads the Human Resources concentration. Rita's company, Personal Development Solutions, provides consultative services to businesses and individuals in the areas of leadership development, emotional intelligence, ethics, diversity, and insurance technical education. Rita served Bryant's Board of Trustees for 9 years and is currently Vice President of our Alumni Association. I'm happy to turn the microphone over to Rita at today's presentation on creating successful webinars. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, Marissa. Thank you so much for those in the audience participating today as well. We are excited to be able to put this together for you. Just a couple of things. Past webinars are available because we do have the Alumni Engagement Webinar Series. So you may visit the career sections of alumniconnect.bryant.edu. And the webinar schedule for any upcoming webinars would be viewed on that site as well. The past webinars are, in fact, archived. So when you do select a past webinar, you will have the opportunity to see the presentation as well as listen to the audio recording. So when you are facilitating a webinar, it's a good idea to let the participants know that the prior ones are available to them as well. So Tim mentioned our key objectives today. So identify techniques for engaging webinars, and that's a critical point, is that you want your webinar to be as interactive as is appropriate for the topic that you're discussing. It's difficult for a participant to sit on a webinar for 45 minutes and not have the opportunity to get a word in. So we will demonstrate through this webinar of how to accomplish some of those objectives. We will cover the role of the presenter and the moderator because they are two clearly distinct roles and different responsibilities that come with each. And then, as Tim mentioned, become acquainted with the webinar delivery system. I must say, and I'm sure Marissa will echo this, that the team at Bryant is very good at helping you to prepare for your webinars and becoming acquainted with the system in advance so you don't have surprises at the last minute. So let's get into some of the techniques. So typically, as Tim mentioned, everyone is in listen-only mode. You could have up to 100 people participating on a webinar, and it's a lot easier and smoother in the process if the participants are in listen-only mode. However, as I mentioned, we like having our participants engaged, so there is a question feature and a chat feature available on your webinar panel where you can type in the information that you want to ask or a comment that you want to make, or if someone has posed a question, say for example the presenter or moderator has posed a question to the audience, then this would be the place where they can type in their answers. Engaging in dialogue with the moderator. It's great to have a conversation. Marissa and I like to do this when we're facilitating, and we will be demonstrating that today as well. That way, your audience will have more than one voice to listen to. It's nice to have a change throughout the webinar. Conduct polls. We do have a poll that is built into this particular webinar so that you will have the opportunity to see how those are performed and conducted. Definitely ask questions. You may have the answers, you may have information ready, but throw questions out there to the audience so that they can be thinking and they can be triggered to respond on whatever that particular topic is. And then addressing chat comments. So what you will see today is that as participants type in their questions or their comments, Marissa, our moderator, will read those questions and comments. As a moderator, she may be responding. Other times, she may be directing those questions to me as the presenter. So let's start out with a poll. And we have participants, so we'd love to have you to answer this question. We'd like to know, how much experience do you have presenting or moderating webinars? And you have three choices. Option A, your first one's coming up. Option B, you've done a few of them, so our poll is open. And then option C, you've done a lot. You've done more than 5 webinars. So let's see how this is going. Great, so 100% of the participants have provided their responses, and the poll results are equally distributed. And what you will also notice when you're presenting is that there will be a message that pops up to let you know that the poll is open. There'll be a message that pops up to let you know that the results are being shared. So we have one person who, 1/3 of the participants will be conducting their first webinar, 1/3 have conducted 3 to 5 webinars, and 1/3 of the participants have conducted a lot of webinars. So great, we're glad to have you participate and share that with us. So typically I like to include a poll very early on to get the audience engaged as early on in the process as is feasible. Habits of successful webinar presenters. As with business, as with anything you do, it's very helpful to do some planning. So knowing your topic, and typically on our Bryant University webinars, we sign up for whatever topic it is that we think the audience wants to hear. So conducting your research to really be the subject matter expert for your particular topic. Use some anticipation. Think about what might a participant want to know, or what can I present to my participants in the form of a poll so I can have them engaged. What are some things that I think would be good learning points that I can present as questions to get some discussion going? Engage, engage, engage. Just as I was reading those responses to you, and just as you will have questions coming up momentarily, it's a great way to, again, engage the audience. Being aware of time. I happen to love presenting webinars, and I only present on topics that I'm enthusiastic about. So what I find happens is I can get so caught up that I forget to look at the clock. And this is where your moderator comes in very, very handy. A critical component. You can't do this without a moderator. If a webinar is scheduled to run for 60 minutes, you want to plan for about 45 minutes of content and 15 minutes of questions and polls. And so those questions and polls, as I indicated before, are going to be interspersed amongst the content, so that, again, you're not talking for 45 minutes and just advancing slides. Another habit, learning to use the webinar software. Typically, we have a drive run about a week in advance of the webinar, and that's where Bryant's Alumni Engagement Office team is very, very helpful in walking you through the system. So you're not going to go through shock on the first day. Practice the controls. Definitely. How do I advance my slides? How do I share my screen? How do I see what's going on the screen? Ask for help. You will get great help and great support. Another important skill is to communicate with the moderator. Let them know how they can help you. So you've done your plan, you've identified your topic, you've done your planning, you're putting together your slides. You may bounce some ideas off the moderator to say, what do you think about this? This is the direction I'm going. What have you heard from folks about this particular topic? When you've got your slide presentation, your deck completed, definitely share the presentation with your moderator ahead of time, before the dry run even, so that the moderator has time to look at the slides and they can perform their own planning as well and provide you with any kind of input, any kind of recommendations, any type of feedback that they may find helpful to you as well. Couple of tips. One is it's nice to have graphics in your webinar presentations. My recommendation is if you're going to use anything that's flashy, please don't make every slide flashy. Maybe a couple of slides here and there, but something other than just having words on the screen. And as mentioned here, if you're using graphics other than photos that you've taken or something that you've created, you must be aware of copyright issues. I do a search using Bing, and I restrict my search to graphics that only have Creative Commons licensing, because technically if it's listed as Creative Commons, the license holder will indicate that it's free for use as long as you attribute the source. Or if clip art is available, use clip art and you don't have to worry about it. There are some sources out there that you can buy a subscription to if you want really fancy graphics in your presentation as well. There is the concept of fair use under the copyright laws in the United States. And fair use says if you are using intellectual materials for the sake of education, there is generally copyright protection, a licensing available to you. My caution is if you're having somebody else design your presentation, to really be careful with that. An example I will share is a nonprofit organization that I belong to. We hosted an event for Heart Health Month, and we had a presenter who had her slide deck, and she had cartoons embedded in her slides to get people laughing and smiling when talking about the serious topic of having a healthy heart. We then, the organization, the nonprofit, posted her slide deck on our chapter's website for attendees to view later or to share with family and friends. What we did not realize was one of the cartoons was copyright protected. Our organization, even though we are a nonprofit, we received a demand for payment, basically a cease and desist from the organization representing the copyright holder. We went back, we fell on our sword, we did the mea culpa and said we're nonprofit, we had no malicious intent, and they fined us, they reduced it to $100 for us, so we still had to pay. Had we been a commercial entity, I'm sure it would have cost considerably more. So again, just a word to the wise, be aware of whatever graphics you use. Personal tips, definitely be organized. Have that glass of water or bottle of water right there in front of you. I'd even recommend having a straw, because if you're sipping a glass of water, people can hear you swallowing. Or what happens if you're trying to pick up the glass and you're turning something on the phone and it just drops, then you've got to recover from that. I like to print out copies of my slides so that I can make sure I'm keeping track. I might jot notes on those slides, hence the pen. I use a landline for my webinars rather than my cell phone because I believe the reception is clearer. And I have a Plantronics headset connected to it. And then, of course, you want to make sure all of your technology is working. Your power cord is plugged in, your screen adapters are available to you so that you can see your presentation and so that everything works smoothly. So with that, I have a question for those of you in the audience. What is your greatest concern about presenting a webinar? What is it that might keep you up at night when you're thinking about, I'm building this, I'm about to share knowledge with people I can't see, or maybe the fact that you can't see them is what makes you feel comfortable? You know, we'd like to know so that we can provide some information and share some thoughts with you as well.
So this is Marissa. If you have any questions that you're thinking about, this is when you could submit it through the question toolbox. And if you don't see that you actually have a question tool, there is an orange arrow in the top right corner. I think if you click on that, you can open up a question toolbox. But I think most of you have used the tool so far, so you have had it, have access to it. So one of our attendees, Rita, suggests that that person would be worrying about speaking too fast. She says, we're both doing a great job of speaking clearly, but how do you, that would be something that she would worry about.
Okay, good question. Thank you. One of the recommendations I have for that is to consciously breathe while you're talking, because you could feel that you're talking too fast in the first few minutes because here's this webinar and I want to hurry up and I'm nervous and oh my God, are they going to listen? Are they going to like it? And the more nervous we get, the less we breathe. And the less we breathe, the more rapid our speech is going to be. So one is breathing. No matter what, I always recommend breathing. Another technique is you may want to do a practice of your slide presentation yourself before even being on the system, and use a timer. All of our smartphones have countdown timers, so you can set the timer to see how long it's taking to get through your material. The third tip I recommend is talk as if you're having a conversation with someone, even though you can't see them. Visualize the person on the other side of the phone, or have a picture of somebody whom you enjoy speaking with nearby so you can treat it that you're having a conversation with them. Thanks, Marissa.
Another question, Rita, is how many slides is a good number to include in a presentation?
That varies depending upon the amount of information that you're conveying. Typically, I have for an hour presentation around 20 to 24 slides. That includes the title slide, that includes the bios, the pictures of the moderator and presenter, that includes the objectives, and you want things to be nicely spaced, and that includes a reference slide at the end, and then later we're going to talk about your slide for promoting yourself. So I'd say out of all of that, maybe 15 to 18 of content, depending upon what you're covering. I have been on webinars where the presenter had a 40-deck presentation for an hour. It was going too fast because while you're talking, your audience is also reading, which also brings up you don't want to read everything to them verbatim. So I would say 20 to 24 slides is what tends to work for me. I have rarely gone over that, and my webinars have all been an hour.
I would agree that I've been on webinars where there's like 60 or 70 slides, and it's just too much content to even absorb.
Right. Thank you.
And we have another question from an attendee about, which I think is actually a good lead-in to the next slide about a moderator's role. He's concerned about a lack of interaction and speaking into a black hole.
Okay, and as the presenter, it can feel that way. So that's where, yes, having the picture comes up. If you do any type of face-to-face presentation, I would suggest thinking about it in that way, which is another tip for the presenter. Looking at how to convert information that you would deliver in person into a webinar format. And we do have a resource that we'll be sharing with you. We won't just tell you what to do. We'll give you some tools on how to do this as well. But yeah, you could feel like you're talking into a black hole, or like people walking down the street talking on their cell phone and there's nobody around. It's okay. Look at your screen, look at a picture. You could have something on in the background. Sometimes I'll have the TV on, muted of course, in the background so that I feel like I'm in a room with other people.
But it's also, Rita, a good way for the moderator to step in and perform, their responsibilities, so to speak, so that it isn't feeling like, recognize that it could feel like a black hole, or the presenter might not understand what's going on, how are attendees paying attention, are they engaged, and if you get the moderator to do that, then it starts to feel better as a presenter.
Great, good point, Marissa, thank you. And that's another reason to make it a conversation with your moderator, because then you're not talking to a black hole. There really is a live person on the other end. And we're in two different states at the moment. So, yes, great point.
Right. And then a final question for the moderator, for the presenter, is if there's a useful style guide, like how many bullets or font size, do you think those things matter?
They do matter, actually. All these are great questions. I'm glad we're doing this. You do not want your slides to be overcrowded. I would limit bullets. I like odd numbers, so I would limit bullets to either 3 or 5 one-line bullets. If they're 2 lines, then no more than 3. If they're single lines, no more than 5, and leave spacing. So I'm going to back up the presentation because I'm going to show you a slide where here I just have 5 bullets on this slide and not a lot of words. The ones with the longest amount of content I've got on the bottom so that it's not too top heavy. And a good title, so that, good but not long title, so you're giving a quick hit to the participants. If you're going to have multiple points like we did with the planning slide, and I'll go back to that. This is why it's nice when you are the presenter and you have control of the presentation. You can move back and forth like this. So on this particular slide, I've got 1 major bullet, 4 minor bullets, but again, the font is a nice clean font. This, I believe, is Arial, which doesn't have the little cursive, the serif on the end, so it's nice and clean and crisp. I would stay away from script except for perhaps something I want to emphasize. I would also suggest avoid using red as a dominant font. Avoid using green as a dominant font. And the reason for that is that most people who are colorblind are unable to see red and or unable to see green. So if you're trying to use that as your main font, it's going to wash out. I would also recommend, like the background, we've got a nice clean white background and we've got the bold gold border, which is great. I once sat in a presentation where the person had a red solid background on every slide. We all had headaches because it's very painful. Concerned about colors like yellow. Sometimes your participants may decide to print your slides. So you want to make sure you're not using a color that's going to get washed out when they print. And some screens may not have the best resolution either. Good questions. Any other questions, Marissa?
No, we're all set for that for now.
Okay, then I will turn it over to the moderator.
Okay, so some of the things that we've been hinting at along the way are responsibilities of the moderator. And I like to think of the moderator as the virtual eyes and ears of the presenter. We're the ones who can see what questions they're asking or not asking, and we can see if they're tuned into the presentation or they're beginning to tune out. So getting to understand that webinar tool is really important so that you can read the activity level of the participants. So the thing, when you feel like there's a lack of engagement from the participants, sometimes it just takes somebody to step up and be the first one, and that's when you can engage. You can engage as the moderator and share a personal story or a personal question, or you can engage as a pretend participant, just to get everybody more comfortable with asking questions and the flow of the conversation. It's also really important to keep track of the clock so that the presenter is on track. Usually I like to know where they're at, like at the 30-minute mark, just to make sure we're moving along as originally planned. We also have advanced preparation, so it's knowing the content, certainly not as thoroughly as the presenter, but you know a little bit about what they're going to be talking about, and you can help think of questions that attendees might not be asking, just to be able to engage as if you were an attendee or as the moderator, and keep make it more conversational for the presenter as opposed to a strict 60 minutes of lecturing. Coordinate in advance with the presenter on how to support them using the tool and being aware of time. I know we've talked about these before, and they're just as important for the moderator as the presenter. Fully engaging with attendees. So you've been using the question tool and submitting unique questions to be asked of the presenter, and it is the moderator's role to see those questions. I like to acknowledge that I've read it, and when I think we'll be able to get it, interrupt the presenter and get those questions out to her. Sometimes, especially when there's a lot of questions, or maybe somebody's asking a question that's already been answered, I might just answer the question myself. And I also keep track of any questions that come in those last 30 seconds, because there might not be an opportunity to answer it on the webinar. We're running out of time, and I'll keep track of who's asking the question, and then we'll get back to that attendee after the call is over and just make sure their questions are answered. It's also important to maintain confidentiality of the attendees. I think that that's part of the inherent process. So while you're supporting the presenter, it is good for you to assess how things are going from an activity perspective of our attendees. If they're quiet, ask some prepared questions, share your own stories or experiences, and again, remind the presenter when the time is becoming a concern. One of the questions that has come up from our attendees is, what is the lag time on questions? Do you see them right away? And I'm pretty sure we see them right away. There might be a few seconds lag, but I'm pretty sure we see them right away. And by my actually speaking to your question just after you posted it, I hope you're getting a sense of it too, and you'll be able to share that with us later. So now we're at a point of asking all of you a question again. what is your greatest concern about moderating a webinar? And yeah, and the attendee did, by the way, say yes, it was right away. So it's very quick Q&A process. So, but what is your greatest concern about moderating a webinar? Do you have any questions for us? I don't see anything coming in. Do you think of anything, Rita, that we might not have touched on?
I'm thinking, if I'm the moderator, how do you handle the multitasking when you are listening to the presenter, you're keeping track of time, and you're keeping your eye out for questions that may be coming in?
Yeah, it is, as the moderator, it does get a little bit confusing. But there is a list of attendees that you can open up, and when they ask a question, a little question mark pops up in the screen, so you can then open up the tool and see what their question is. When you respond to it, the question mark goes away. There's also a tool that indicates whether or not the participant is focused on the webinar. It's open on their laptop or their desktop main screen as their primary, view, or if they have moved to look at something else, perhaps their email. And when you do that, we see a little exclamation mark pop up, and that is an indication that they're not quite completely tuned in. And I can see that right now 2 of our attendees are not as engaged as one of our attendees who practiced and went back and forth with it. So she said she was multitasking, and I caught her at it. So that's how you know whether they're participating or not. And one of our attendees was listening because he's back into the group.
I find that part so fascinating. And listening to you, I just expanded the list of attendees, and I said, oh, there it is, because I wondered how you knew that. But folks, trust us, we're not seeing your screen, so we don't know what you're doing when you're not participating.
That's
so
correct. We don't have that access.
No, we don't have that access, so no, you don't have to worry about that. I'm trying to think if there might be another question from the perspective of the moderator.
What I have right now is just one of our participants kind of going back and forth through the Q&A on, multitasking. And it does happen. It does happen if you're going back and forth. So, but I do believe we've answered everybody.
Okay, great. A couple of more tips that at least one more tip that I wanted to bring up, and that is, if you are, whether you're the presenter or the moderator, is to mute your phone when you're not speaking. So during the time that Marissa was speaking, I had my headset on mute so that if I'm rustling papers or jotting down notes like I was about this, that way I'm not interrupting or interfering with her part of the presentation. And I mentioned that I have a Plantronics headset. The second tip I wanted to let you know is you don't have to go out and spend a fortune on a headset. This is a headset that maybe costs $60, and it just plugs into my cordless phone handset. It does not work on the mobile phone. It's a different plug. But you don't have to spend a lot of money to have good quality sound, and you don't have to feel like you have to sit here holding the phone to your ear. So it's whatever works for you. And I think, Marissa, you may be using a speakerphone on a landline. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, we tried also using our computer speakers. And this is another point about testing things out. So when I was using my computer speakers, one person told me, wow, you sound perfectly clear. Another person told me, you sound like you're talking through a computer, like you're coming out of one of those boxes. So for me, the landline works.
And it works well, much better for me than my laptop speakers.
Okay, great. So next steps would be, this will be archived also, so you have the opportunity to review it. Of course, we make the offer to make ourselves available to you. So if you have questions of either of us or both of us, please send an email and we will definitely respond to you. What is one tip from this webinar that you will use? Something that you found particularly helpful. And while you're doing that, this is another part of moderating and presenting a webinar, is when you present a question, it's important to give people a few seconds to answer. So you might feel uncomfortable with dead air, so that's when the moderator and the presenter could be having a conversation while people are taking the time to type in whatever their questions are. You don't want to ask a question and then turn around and move on to the next slide, because now you've lost participants' engagement.
Absolutely. One of our attendees is actually committed to moderating in the future for us, feeling that they're better prepared. So that's good. Very good results.
Good. Good. And it's interesting because as the presenter, I also see a flashing bubble telling me I have an unread chat message. And it's more about not somebody directing something to me, but this was a message and my system is flashing to let me know that there is a message there. So as the presenter, you have the option, should you choose, I feel like Mission Impossible, your option, should you choose to accept it, is you can also read what's going on. So you can see the questions, you can see the chat feature as well. And I'm one of those, I like to have my eyes on everything. So I like to read what else is going on. I depend on and count on Marissa as the moderator, or whomever my moderator may be, to be the one who, that's their primary responsibility. For me, it's like an added bonus in case I'm saying something that might be confusing or it might trigger a thought. There are others who facilitate webinars who say, please, I don't want to see anything. I just want to focus on my slides and my content. And either way, it's perfectly fine. It's whatever it is that you feel most comfortable doing. This is your opportunity. I mentioned we were going to talk about marketing your services. So you're donating time. So you're doing this for free. This is not a paid assignment. And it's for the benefit of alumni. And one of the things we like to do as alum is to showcase our services. So be sure to include a slide to tell about what it is you do, what services you provide, what your products may be. It's not about you, the webinar. However, the slide gives you your 15 seconds for your commercial. So what I like to do in my 15 seconds is I'll have my slide up and I'll be talking while people are looking at my contact information. So a little bit about what you do, how people can reach you, your preferred methods. I prefer LinkedIn and Twitter and the telephone, more so telephone meaning text as well as calling, rather than putting my email up. So this, since I'm self-employed, this is a way that I drive people to anything that has to do with my business and the services that I can provide to them. What we also strongly recommend is that you provide resources. At the end of the webinar, it's important for your participants to walk away with something that they can do, something they can use, a way to get further knowledge. So that's what this slide is representing. So I mentioned that there was a slide that talks about how to take a webinar, how to take something you do face-to-face and convert it to a webinar. That's what this website is, idealware.org. It's a blog. So explore that one. Google is a great thing for typing in, how do I convert my presentation to a webinar? How many slides look good? What colors work? All of those resources are there. This is really a great, absolutely great tool. So with that, Marissa, I'll turn it over to you for the close. And thank you, everybody, for participating.
Yes, actually, we turn it over to Tim. Tim does our close.
That's true.
Oh, okay, so I'll close now. So at this time, usually I end with a quick little closing to also remind everybody that we are recording this webinar and that we are archiving it, and we'll make our PowerPoint presentation available to everybody. So here's the close. On behalf of the Bryant Alumni Association, I'd like to thank Rita and Marissa for an excellent presentation, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon.